When I look back at that summer in Cleveland, Ohio, I still get chills. At first, it seemed like something ordinary, maybe even funny in a strange way, but as days went by, the truth revealed itself, and it was far from harmless. My name is Laura Mitchell, and I'm a single mom. My son, Ethan, had just turned 14. He was a quiet, thoughtful kid, someone who'd rather sit with a book than run around outside. We lived in a small two-story home in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone knew each other's names and nothing much ever happened. But one night, I woke up to a strange sound. It was around 2 a.m., and I heard footsteps creaking down the hallway. At first, I thought maybe I had left the TV on downstairs and the noise was drifting upward, but as I listened more carefully, I realized it was inside the house. I got out of bed, my heart racing, and peeked into the hallway. To my shock, there was Ethan walking slowly toward the stairs. His eyes were open but glazed over, and his movements were stiff and robotic. My first thought was he's sleepwalking. I had read about it before, but I had never seen it happen in real life. I didn't want to startle him, so I just quietly followed as he made his way down the stairs. He went straight into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and stood there staring inside as if he couldn't decide what he was looking for. Then, just as suddenly, he closed the fridge, turned around, and walked back upstairs into his room. I tucked him into bed, whispered, "Good night, sweetie," even though I knew he couldn't hear me, and went back to my own room, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. The next morning, I asked him, "Ethan, do you remember getting up last night?" He looked confused and shook his head.
No, Mom.
Why? I told him what happened, and he laughed nervously. That's weird. I don't remember any of that. I brushed it off, thinking it was just a one-time thing. But I was wrong. The next night, it happened again. This time, I found him in the living room, standing in front of the window, staring outside as if he was waiting for something or someone. It unnerved me. When I gently tried to guide him back to bed, his body felt heavy, almost resistant, like he didn't want to move. But eventually, he shuffled back upstairs and collapsed onto his bed. The pattern continued for several nights. Each time, he ended up in different parts of the house, sometimes in the hallway, sometimes near the front door, once even in the backyard. I started locking the doors from the inside at night, afraid he might wander out and get lost. At first, I chalked it up to stress. He had just finished a tough school year, and sometimes kids act out in strange ways. But then the situation grew darker. One night, I woke up not to the sound of footsteps, but to a voice. I couldn't make out the words at first, but it was Ethan. He was standing in the middle of his room, whispering rapidly, like he was carrying on a full conversation. My stomach knotted as I stepped closer. "Ethan, who are you talking to?" I asked softly. He froze. His eyes were wide open, staring past me into the corner of the room. And then, in a low, distant tone, he said, "He's already here." A chill ran down my spine. The next morning, when I asked him again if he remembered anything, he shook his head. "Mom, you're scaring me. I don't know why I'm doing this." That's when I decided to get help. I took him to a sleep specialist in downtown Cleveland. Dr. Reynolds was kind, professional, and tried to ease my worries. He explained that sleepwalking in teenagers wasn't uncommon, often triggered by stress, growth spurts, or even genetics. But when I told him about the whispering, his expression tightened. He suggested running a sleep study, hooking Ethan up to monitors overnight to see what was happening during his episodes. While we waited for the appointment, the incidents grew worse. One night, I found him in the basement, something that terrified me because the stairs were steep and dangerous. He was crouched down, drawing shapes on the concrete floor with chalk he must have found in an old box. Circles, lines, strange patterns that didn't make sense. When I bent down and asked what he was doing, he said, "They told me to." I'll never forget the flatness in his voice, the way it didn't sound like my son at all. I wanted to believe this was still just sleepwalking, maybe mixed with some vivid dreaming, but deep down, I felt something was wrong. Finally, the night of the sleep study arrived. Ethan was hooked up to wires and monitors in a small room at the clinic while I sat in the waiting area, nervously watching the live feed on a monitor. For the first couple of hours, Nothing happened. He slept soundly. But around 2:15 a.m., his body stiffened. His breathing changed, becoming shallow and uneven. His eyes opened, and he sat up straight in bed. Then, to my horror, he started speaking again. But this time, the voice that came out of him wasn't his own. It was deeper, raspier, almost like two people talking at once. The words were garbled, but I caught fragments. Open, waiting soon. The technicians scrambled, adjusting the equipment, whispering urgently to each other. The machines recorded spikes in his brain activity, patterns that Dr. Reynolds later admitted he had never seen before. After the episode ended, Ethan collapsed back into bed, breathing heavily, as if nothing had happened. When morning came, he woke up confused but otherwise normal. Dr. Reynolds sat me down and said, "Laura, I don't want to alarm you, but this isn't typical sleepwalking. I think we need to run further neurological tests. There might be something else going on here." I nodded numbly, gripping the edge of my chair. But inside, I already knew. This wasn't just medical. It felt different. That evening, as I drove us home, Ethan was unusually quiet. Finally, he turned to me and said, "Mom, do you ever feel like someone's in the house with us when we're alone?" My heart skipped a beat. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me jump. I sat outside Ethan's room for hours, listening, waiting. Around 3 a.m., I heard him stir. I pushed the door open just in time to see him standing by the window again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Or at least, it didn't feel like he was. The air in the room was heavy, cold, and I swear I saw a shadow flicker across the wall, even though there was nothing outside to cast it. Ethan turned to me slowly, his eyes distant, and whispered, "He wants to come in." That was the moment I realized my son wasn't just sleepwalking. Something else was happening. Something I couldn't explain with science or logic. And from that night forward, everything in our lives changed.